Hello dear first year students, welcome to the course of Phonetics presented by Mr. Aunali Walid and Mrs. Bogufa Zainab. The main goal of teaching English phonetics and phonology is to improve students' pronunciation. As you know, English pronunciation is difficult because there is no consistency between what is written and what is spoken. This is why most students make mistakes when they speak English. Sometimes they pronounce words like when they are spoken in French, especially when the words are not familiar. This is why we teach phonetics in order to improve students' pronunciation through introducing the IPA or the International Phonetic Alphabet in order to get the correct pronunciation of words without finding any difficulty in pronunciation. Let's get started. In the previous course, we have dealt with phonetics, which is a branch of linguistics that studies the speech sounds. We have introduced the different branches of phonetics and phonology, which are articulatory phonetics, studies the articulation or production of sounds using speech organs. Acoustic phonetics deals with sound waves and what happens between the speaker and listener. And auditory phonetics deals with the process of interpreting and understanding the meaning of the produced sounds. So in the present course, we are going to talk about articulatory phonetics in details. In this course, we will deal with the speech mechanism or speech apparatus, which is concerned with the vocal organs or speech organs or how the language sounds are produced. Therefore, the course is a bit difficult because it needs concentration and special attention to the process of producing sounds. By the end of this course, you will be able to recognize the vocal tract and name each organ of speech, know the function of each organ in the production of English sounds. Second, you will be acquainted with the function of each organ of speech in speech production of English sounds. Third, you can use the previous information in defining the properties of English sounds, whether you describe vowel sounds or consonantal sounds. Finally, by the end of this course, you can identify the speech organs and their corresponding English sounds and how can we produce those sounds using our speech organs. As you know, in our daily use of language, we can recognize and we can produce a wide variety of sounds, and those sounds are controlled by the brain. The brain sends a message to the organs in order to produce certain sounds according to our needs. So, our linguistic knowledge allow us to produce a wide variety of sounds, and we can differentiate the non-linguistic sounds that are not part of our language. Let's explain more. In English, we have a sound system that is composed of different sounds that we can produce, and this limited number of phonemes or sounds make up the whole number of sounds in a language. Native speakers acquire a limited number of sounds to speak their language fluently, but when they learn a new language, they will come across new sounds that are not found in their language. For example, if you take a native speaker of English, he is not capable of producing certain sounds in Arabic, or they are very difficult for him because Arabic is a foreign language for them. For example, if you take the sounds r sound, va, ha sound, kha sound, and al-qaf, those sounds are very difficult for English speakers to articulate because they are not found in their language and they didn't acquire them in their childhood. The same problem for Arab learners of English. When they learn English, they find certain vowels that are difficult to produce, especially those vowels like U sound like in two, in tube, or the short vowel U like in put, in good, or the sound A like in cat. We have difference between cat and cat, and we have another sound like in ow. It's sometimes difficult for Arab learners, or o, or the schwa. Those vowels are difficult to produce for Arab learners. We can find even certain consonants that are difficult to produce or articulate, like ny or ing. And some speakers they pronounce as ing, but it is pronounced as ing, or v sound, p sound, and j sound. These sounds are not found in Arabic, but they are found in the foreign language like in French or English. So it will be difficult for Arab learners to pronounce them correctly. This is why we need to know about the speech organs. In Arabic, it is called مخارج الحروف. We must know the place from where those consonants and the place from where those vowel sounds are produced. Let's explain the process of production of sounds in three different systems. In fact, when we produce any sound, we have to know that there are three overlapping systems. We have the digestive system, the respiratory system, and the sound system. In the process of production of sounds, the digestive system and respiratory system are used in the production of speech. But speech production is a complex process. It's not a series of isolated events in the mouth, but it is very complex because we have two overlapping systems that enable us to produce sound. We have articulatory organs which are operate independently from each other. Meanwhile, we have the respiratory system is working. That is, when we produce speech, at the same time we breathing in and breathing out. And to produce any kind of sound, there must be a movement of the air in the vocal tract from the lungs, then it leaves the body. Scientifically speaking, the process of producing sounds is a very complex process because we have two systems that interact to produce any kind of sound. We have the respiratory system and then using our respiratory system to produce any kind of sounds. You may wonder, how do we produce speech? Let's explain speech production in details. The speech is produced using the speech organs, using our speech mechanism. But one curious thing about the organs of speech is that none of them started out that way. They are all designed for purposes other than speech. For example, the lungs are primarily intended for breathing. We use our lungs to breathe in oxygen and to breathe out carbon dioxide. The teeth and the tongue for chewing up food and passing it down to the stomach. So we have this function is called survival function. Nevertheless, the human being is uniquely speaking creature. The human beings are special in their spoken language because animals, they do not use language in speaking, unlike animals which produce limited number of sounds for sake of communication, but not like humans who produce it for daily purposes. For communication, all the organs of speech have developed very specialized ways, often quite remote from their original purpose. Perhaps the best example of this is the larynx, which is shown below. This was originally a device for keeping chewed up food from entering the lungs. It acts as a valve to prevent any foreign body in entering the lungs, but it has evolved into one of the most intricate parts of the vocal apparatus, playing a crucial role in speech, in which it is responsible for producing different sounds and vibration. Without vibration, we cannot produce vowels and most of consonants. The majority of the speech sounds found in human speech are produced by an aggressive pulmonic airstream, which means an outgoing airstream produced by the lungs. Aggressive, it is the reverse of ingressive. That is, all the air that we produce while speaking is moving out of our body, not inside. Vocal tract. Pulmonic, the responsible source for producing sounds is from our lungs, which is energy source for producing the different sounds of speech. Airstream, so we produce sounds using airstream from the lungs when they decrease in size by means of contraction, partially collapsing inwards and thus pushing out the air contained within them outwards. So the production of speech is done through different processes, starting from the lungs, in which we push out the air, then moving to the trachea, then we have the larynx, then then the air will go out through the mouth cavity or the nasal cavity. The process of communication using speech needs a speaker and listener, and this process is called speech chain or speech cycle. Any manifestation of language by means of speech is the result of highly complicated series of events. Communication in sound of a simple utterance as in the sentence "it's raining" involves a number of activities on the part of the speaker. In the first place, the formulation of the concept will take place at the linguistic level, that is, in the brain. The first stage may therefore be said physiological level because we use the body to produce those sounds in order to make the first utterance. That is composed of series of sounds to make comprehensible utterance from the part of the speaker. The figure below shows the speech chain. In the speech chain, we have a speaker and listener, and between the speaker and listener, we can find the cycle of communication using speech wave. The first stage in the production of speech, it is in the linguistic level, that is inside the mind. We have prior knowledge of the language that we are going to use in communication. First, in the brain, we think of an idea or something that we are going to talk about. Then, from linguistic level in the brain, we send a message using our motor nerves to the vocal muscles in order to produce speech. In the process of production or articulation of speech, we have physiological level. So we start first by the psychological level. In this stage, the nervous system transmits the message to the organs of speech. After linguistic level and psychological level, the speaker will send a message as sound waves, and those sound waves between the speaker and listener. Meanwhile, after producing speech, we have feedback link. This feedback link acts as a feedback to the speaker in order to adjust his volume of sound or correct any mistake when it is not correctly sent. In the physiological stage, may also called articulatory stage, it is important for our purpose in phonetics. In this stage, the movement of the organs will create disturbances in the air. These carrying air pressures constitute the third stage. The third stage, it is called the physical or the acoustic stage. Since communication generally requires a listener as well as a speaker, these stages will be reversed to the listening end, and the reception of the sound waves by or the physiological level from the part of the listener, and the transmission of the information along the nervous system to the brain, where the linguistic interpretation and understanding of the message takes place as physiological level. In fact, the production of any speech sound takes place when the air escapes from the lungs as energy source, which serves as an air reservoir and energy source for production of speech. Then the airstream passes through trachea or windpipe, through the larynx, which lies behind the throat. The larynx contains two stressed membranous cords called the vocal cords or vocal folds, which are made of elastic tissue. As they open and shut off, the vocal cords regulate the amount of air that passes to the lungs. Afterwards, the air goes up through the pharynx and escapes via the oral cavity or the nasal cavity in order to produce speech. What are the speech organs of the human beings? First, we will discuss all the steps of the production of human speech sound. All the organs shown below in figure number 1 contribute in the production of speech. All the sounds of English are made using airstream on its way out from the lungs. The lungs pull in and push out air, helped by the diaphragm. The air goes out via the trachea, القصبة الهوائية, where the first obstruction it meets is the larynx, الحنجرة. Inside the larynx, it passes by the vocal folds, الأحبال الصوتية, which may vibrate or not. Afterwards, it goes up through the pharynx, then it escapes via either the oral cavity, التجويف الفموي, or the nasal cavity, التجويف الأنفي. Almost all the organs involved in speech production also have other functions. The lungs, for example, and the diaphragm are obviously involved in breathing, as is the nasal cavity, which cleans, heats, and humidifies the air that is breathed in. The teeth and the tongue play a part in digestion, and in a way, so do the vocal folds, as they have to be closed once swallowing to keep food from going on the wrong way to the lungs. let's explain more details about the vocal tract or speech organs. There are 4 places in which a sound can be modified. You have to add to this the fact that the vocal folds can vibrate. We have sound modification places occur in the vocal folds, which make vibration, in the pharynx, the oral cavity, the nasal cavity, and the lips. All these places make the sounds different. All those places are responsible for changing the way of the sound to produce different sounds. For example, the lips can produce p, b. In the oral cavity, we produce oral sounds. In the nasal cavity, we produce nasal sounds. In the pharynx, we have different pharyngeal sounds that are not found in English, but we can find them in Arabic, like in r and r. These sounds are produced in the pharynx. When we describe the articulation of consonants, we need to refer to the places from where they are produced. So in this case, we are going to use scientific terms for place of articulation. For example, English noun, the glottis, we use for the glottis, glotton. For the larynx, laryngeal. For pharynx, pharyngeal. For epiglottis, epiglottal. For tongue, back or dorsum, dorsal. For corona, coronal sound. For tongue tip or apex, apical. For tongue blade or lamina, laminal. For alveolar ridge, alveolar. For hard palate, palatal. For soft palate or velum, velar. For uvula, uvular. For lungs, pulmonal. For teeth, dental sounds. For lips, labial sounds. For the nasal cavity, nasal sounds. Dual function of speech organs. In fact, the speech organs are used mainly for survival function, not speech function. The main function of the lungs is to exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen. But it has another function in speech, which is providing airflow to the organs of speech in order to produce communication. The vocal cords cover tube to lungs. Speech function is vibration. The tongue move food in mouth, articulation of all vowels and some consonants. The teeth are used for chewing up food, for chewing food. In speech function, articulation of some consonants like th and the. The lips are used for sealing oral cavity, and closing the mouth to preventing anything from falling from the mouth. Articulation of some consonants like p and b, m and w. The nose is used for breathing. In speech, it is used for nasal resonance. In the human body, we have 2 systems that contribute in the production of speech: digestive system and the respiratory system. In order to produce speech, we use our respiratory system, but the respiratory system shares some organs with the digestive system. The figure below shows the digestive system, which contains the mouth, the pharynx, and the esophagus, while the respiratory system contains the lungs, the trachea, the larynx. So the shared organ between them is the larynx. So the larynx acts as a valve. We cannot speak at the same time because the larynx can perform only one function, either moving food to the stomach or moving the airflow to the lungs. So the larynx functions as a valve to regulate the food and the air. The diaphragm acts as energy source. It is the large muscle between your lungs and your stomach that moves up and down to move air in and out of the lungs. In Arabic, it is called hijab al-hajiz. Afterwards, we find the lungs. The lungs are the primary organs of the respiratory system in humans and many other mammals. 2 lungs are located near the backbone on either side of the heart. Their function in the respiratory system is to extract oxygen from the atmosphere and transfer it into the bloodstream, and to release carbon dioxide from the bloodstream into the atmosphere. In the process of gas exchange, respiration is driven by different muscular systems. In humans, the main muscle of respiration that drives breathing is the diaphragm. The lungs also provide airflow that makes vocal sounds, including human speech, possible. The trachea or trachea, also called windpipe, is the cartilaginous tube that connects the larynx to the bronchi of the lung, allowing the passage of the air, and so is present in almost all air-breathing animals with lungs. The trachea extends from the larynx and branches into 2 primary bronchi. At the top of the trachea, The cricoid cartilage attaches it to the larynx. The trachea is formed by a number of horseshoe-shaped rings joined together vertically by ligaments over the substance and by bitracheous muscle at their end. The epiglottis closes to the larynx during swallowing. Esophagus is part of the digestive system. It is informally known as food pipe or gullet. It is an organ in vertebrates through which food passes from pharynx to the stomach. The esophagus is fibromuscular tube about 25 cm long in adults, which travels behind the trachea and heart, passes through the diaphragm, and empties into the uppermost region of the stomach. During swallowing, the epiglottis tilts backwards to prevent food from going down to the larynx and lungs. The oral cavity or mouth is an oval-shaped cavity located anterior to the pharynx and beginning of alimentary canal, where the process of digestion is initiated. The front of this cavity is bounded by the inner surface of the lips and cheeks to the gums and teeth. The front is defined mostly by the tongue. The nasal cavity is a large air-filled space above and behind the nose, in the middle of the surface. The nasal septum divides the cavity into two cavities. Each cavity is continuation of the one of the two nostrils. The nasal cavity is the uppermost part of the respiratory system and provides nasal passage for inhaled air from the nostrils to the nasopharynx and the rest of the respiratory tract. In speech production, the nasal sounds are articulated when the soft palate is lowered, like in m, n, and ng. The pharynx is the part of the throat behind the mouth and nasal cavity and above the esophagus and trachea. The tubes going down to the stomach and the lungs. In humans, pharynx is part of digestive system and respiratory system. The human pharynx is conventionally divided into three sections: the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, or the laryngopharynx. It's also important in speech production, like in Arabic. In Arabic, the two sounds al-ha, al-een. Larynx. The larynx is commonly called the voice box, which is an organ in the top of the neck involved in breathing, producing sound, and protecting the trachea against food aspiration. The larynx houses the vocal folds and manipulates pitch and volume of the sound, which is essential for phonation. It is situated just below where the tract of the pharynx splits into trachea and the esophagus. In humans, vocal cords, also known as vocal cords or voice reeds, are folds of tissue in the throat that are key in creating sounds through vocalization. The size of the vocal cords affects the pitch of voice. Open when breathing and vibrating of speech or singing. They are composed of twin enfoldings of mucous membranes, stretched horizontally from back to front across the larynx. They vibrate, modulating the flow of air being expelled from the lungs during phonation or the production of voiced consonants, like in all the vowels and some consonants. The epiglottis is a leaf-shaped flap in the throat that prevents food from entering windpipe and the lungs. It stands open during breathing, allowing air into the larynx. During swallowing, it closes, forcing swallowed liquids or food to go along the esophagus towards the stomach instead. It is thus the valve that diverts passage to either the trachea or the esophagus. The uvula is a small conical pendulous process extending from middle of the posterior portion of the soft palate, just superior to the oropharynx. It is observable above the entrance of the throat when the mouth is open. It's believed that the uvula acts as a small blockade to prevent food prematurely entering the pharynx or fluids entering the nasal cavity. The uvula may also contribute to speech articulations. Vibration of the uvula and soft palate during sleep contributes to snoring. Then we find the soft palate, or the velum, which can be lowered and raised. It is lowered when we produce nasal sounds like m, n, ny, and raised in the rest of the consonants and all the vowels. Hard palate, which is in the middle of the roof of the mouth with different ridges, and in this place we produce y sound. The vocal cords, which can move towards each other to stop or let the air to pass freely in the glottis. Let's explain more. If you say a long sound and put your fingers on your neck by the side of the larynx, you will feel the vibration of the vocal cords. Now, if you say s, sound, you will feel no vibration. This vibration is called voice. So, some English sounds are voiced, that is, they are produced with a vibration in the vocal cords, and others are voiceless, that is, they are produced without any kind of vibration in the vocal cords. In fact, all the vowel sounds are produced with a vibration in the vocal cords. For consonants, most of the consonants are voiced and some of them are voiceless. We have three states of vocal cords. In A, the vocal cords tightly closed when we swallow. For swallowing or when we produce the glottal stop, that is like in what. In this case, the vocal cords are tightly closed. That is, they prevent the entry of air inside the lungs. They stop the air completely. They close the passage for the lungs. In B, the vocal cords are loosely together. They make vibration, which is found in voiced consonants and all the vowels. C, the vocal cords are open when we breathe and when we produce voiceless consonants. The palate. The palate forms the roof of the mouth and separates the mouth cavity from the nasal cavity. It contains the alveolar ridge behind the upper front teeth. We can produce alveolar sounds like t, d, s, z, n, l, and r. The hard palate in the middle with different ridges. Soft palate, which can be lowered and raised when producing nasal sounds and oral sounds, and the alveolar ridge, in which the former ends in uvula. The lower front teeth are not important in speech production, except when you produce s and z. But the two upper front teeth are more important in the production of English sounds like th and th, and labiodental sounds f and v. The tongue is divided into four parts. The back of the tongue is under the soft palate, and the front is under the hard palate, whereas the blade is under the alveolar ridge and the tip behind the teeth. The tongue takes many shapes and positions when articulating vowels. So it is raised when you produce high vowels like in E and E. It's in mid position when we produce A and A. And it is lowered when you produce long A and O. Remark, the tongue can be raised, lowered, moving forward, backward, or rolled back, like when we produce R sound. There are 5 areas of the tongue: tip, blade, body, back, and root. The lips can take many positions. They can stop the air and release it suddenly, like in plosives P and B. Lower lip can touch the upper teeth to produce F and V with the upper front teeth. The articulation of the vowels depend mainly on the shape of the lips, such as E and A with spread lips, U and O. The lips are rounded. Then the lips are neutral when we produce the schwa, like in A and in A. The V upside down, the central vowel A. Time for practice. Exercise number 1. Label the following vocal organs in the human speech apparatus. 1. Upper lip. 2. Nasal cavity. 3. Upper teeth. 4. Alveolar ridge. 5. Hard palate. 6. Soft palate. 7. Uvula. 8. Pharynx. 9. Vocal folds. 10. Glottis. 11. Lower teeth. 12. Lower lip. 13. Tongue. A. Tongue tip. B. Tongue front. C. Center of the tongue. D. Back of the tongue. E. Root of the tongue. Exercise number 2. What is the function of the following vocal organs in speech? The vocal cords, the lips, the tongue, the teeth, the lungs, the oral cavity, the epiglottis, the diaphragm, the uvula, and the soft palate. Exercise number 3. What's the difference between the following organs? Oral, nasal, pulmonic, non-pulmonic sounds, egressive, ingressive, fortis, lenis. voiced, voiceless, rounded, unrounded, glottis, epiglottis, trachea, windpipe, Adam's apple, larynx, velum, uvula. Thank you so much for your attention.